It started like any other quiet morning in our small neighborhood. The sun was just starting to rise, birds were chirping, and my electric vehicle was still plugged in, quietly pulling charge from the solar-powered backup grid I had helped set. A one that also happened to supply emergency power to our local fire station during outages. But that peaceful routine shattered the moment Karen, the head of our HOA, marched over like she owned the entire block. No knock, no warning. Just pure rage as she yanked the charging cable straight out of the outlet like she was disarming a bomb. At first, I thought it was a bad joke. But the look on her face told me she was dead serious. She claimed the cable was an eyesore and a code violation that she was authorized to handle. She didn't ask who it belonged to, didn't care where it ran, made up her mind and ripped it out. But here's the twist: what she didn't know, or didn't bother to check, was that this cable wasn't just juicing up my EV. It was the primary line feeding backup power to the fire department just 2 blocks away. Suddenly, the stakes were no longer about neighborhood rules or one woman's petty power trip. They were about public safety. And while she stormed off feeling victorious, alarms had already started to go off literally. I started getting alerts from the smart grid interface. Then came the call from the station. Backup power was dropping. Systems were flickering. And with wildfire season creeping in, the last thing anyone needed was a downed fire response system. And the craziest part? Karen still had no idea what she'd done. But that was about to change, because what happened next turned everything upside down. Karen's been the HOA president for a little over a year now, and ever since she got that title, she's been on a mission to micromanage every corner of the neighborhood. From writing people up for leaving their trash bins out to sending warning letters about unapproved flower pots. She's made it her full-time job to nitpick. But this time, she crossed a line she didn't even know existed a few months back. After a severe storm knocked out power in half the town, I teamed up with a few neighbors and the fire department to install a solar-powered emergency backup grid. It's nothing fancy, just a smart system that kicks in when the main power fails, mostly to keep the firehouse connected to essential services. We ran the infrastructure discreetly, mostly underground and hidden from view. My home, being centrally located, became the connection point for one of the key battery systems. The only visible part? A heavy-duty charging cable in my driveway, plugged into my EV when not actively supporting the grid. But of course, Karen saw that one small cable and decided it was a safety hazard that violated her made-up standards. She didn't attend the community meeting where we presented the fire station plan. She didn't read the newsletters. She didn't even bother to ask. She just saw something she didn't like and acted like she was doing everyone a favor by tearing it out. Meanwhile, my phone was blowing up. The fire chief was trying to reach me. Backup power at the station had dropped to 40% and falling. Dispatch systems were flickering. If an emergency call came in right then, it could have been chaos. And the worst part, Karen was still bragging to another neighbor about how she finally took care of that mess in my driveway. She had no clue the storm she'd just set off. I rushed over to the fire station, hoping to patch things up before any real damage was done. The chief met me at the door, clearly stressed. The backup systems had already cut out in 2 zones, and the comms room was running on a bare-bones inverter. He didn't need to say it, but I could tell this wasn't just about a neighborhood spat anymore. This was about real risk. Lives could be on the line if a fire broke out and response time was delayed even by a minute. Back at home, I tried reconnecting the power line, but Karen had done more than just unplug it. She'd yanked the cable so hard that one of the terminals bent and the outer casing had a crack. It wasn't safe to use anymore. I'd have to replace the entire cord just to get it running again. That meant precious hours lost. As I was inspecting the damage, I spotted her across the street. chatting with a couple from the HOA board. She was smiling, arms crossed, clearly proud of what she'd done. They didn't know the full story. Not yet. I considered marching over, explaining the whole situation, but I knew how that would go. Karen doesn't back down. She doubles down, especially when she's in front of an audience. So I decided to try another route. I called up Officer Jenkins, a friend of mine from the local PD, who also happened to attend the emergency grid planning sessions. He was shocked when I told him what happened. Wait, she ripped it out. That's the station's backup team. He said he'd swing by and see what he could do. But before he could even get there, someone anonymously reported me to the HOA for illegal electrical modifications. Yeah, you guessed it, Karen. Now, I wasn't just fighting to restore power. I was facing possible fines and removal of the entire system. And the worst part, the weather report said dry winds were coming in fast, and fire risk was climbing. By the time Officer Jenkins arrived, the HOA had already posted a formal notice on my front door. It claimed I was endangering the community with unauthorized infrastructure and demanded I remove all non-approved equipment within 24 hours. My heart sank. They had no idea that removing that gear could shut down emergency power completely, and Karen wasn't just ignoring it. She was fueling it. Word spread fast, and a few neighbors started giving me strange looks, probably wondering if I really had done something wrong. Jenkins took one look at the notice and shook his head. "This is bad," he muttered, then stepped back to his cruiser to call the fire chief directly. Meanwhile, I scrambled to find a replacement cable online, but every supplier had delays 2 days minimum. I tried local hardware stores, nothing in stock that could handle the load. I was running out of time, just as I got off the phone with a specialty supplier. The power flickered again, this time at the station and on my own grid monitoring system. That was the third drop in under an hour. The batteries drained any. Further, critical fire response tools, radios, dispatch terminals, even garage door openers would go dark. The worst-case scenario was suddenly starting to look very real. Then the wind picked up. I stepped outside and felt it dry. Warm gusts sweeping through the neighborhood, stirring up dust and brittle leaves. This was exactly the kind of weather that triggers red flag warnings in our area. And wouldn't you know it, sirens echoed faintly in the distance. It wasn't our station responding, but someone nearby was already in trouble. Karen, still oblivious, was walking her dog like nothing was wrong. She waved at someone and laughed. Meanwhile, I was watching the emergency power grid crumble hour by hour, and I hadn't even told her yet. The county emergency coordinator had just been looped in. Things were about to escalate fast. Just as I was about to head back inside and figure out my next move, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't the fire chief or Officer Jenkins. It was the county emergency coordinator herself. Her voice was sharp and to the point. "We've detected grid failure in Sector 12. What's happening with the fire station backup?" My stomach dropped. Sector 12 was our zone, I explained. What had happened in the calmest way I could, but I could hear the concern in her silence. "You need to get it operational again. Now, we've got fire activity reported in the hills." That's when the second twist hit, one I didn't see coming at all. She added, "We're dispatching a drone to check the backup grid status. If it confirms what you just said, the county may override HOA authority under emergency code." Wait, what? I didn't even know that was possible. But apparently, in emergency conditions, the county had the power to seize control of neighborhood infrastructure if public safety was at risk. I just had to hang on until that drone got there and make sure nothing else was tampered with. In the meantime, only problem: Karen wasn't done. She must have seen me talking to Jenkins earlier, because within the hour, she rallied to other board members and started walking the block, clipboard in hand, documenting violations. I saw them stop outside my garage, peering at the backup grid equipment through the side window. Then one of them took a picture. I overheard her saying, "We should report this to the building inspector before he causes a real hazard." That's when it hit me. They weren't just trying to remove the cable. They were now preparing to shut the whole grid down permanently. Meanwhile, wind gusts were hitting over 30 miles per hour, and dry brush reports were coming in from just across the main road. The fire department's hands were tied without full power, and the drone was still 25 minutes out. I was running out of options fast. The wind was howling now, strong enough to rattle my garage door. My phone buzzed again, another alert from the fire station. Backup power had officially dropped below 15%, and critical systems were going into emergency lockdown. I knew if something didn't happen fast, they'd lose control over the dispatch and garage access. The drone was still 20 minutes away, and Karen was now standing in my driveway, clipboard in one hand, HOA violation form in the other. She looked like she was ready to tape it to my forehead. I took a deep breath and stepped outside. "Karen, stop. You have no idea what you've done," I said, trying to keep calm, even though everything inside me was screaming. She rolled her eyes. "It's just a cord." "You can charge your little toy somewhere else," she snapped, "like the fire station." And its people didn't even exist. That's when Officer Jenkins pulled up, lights flashing, serious as ever. "Ma'am, step away from the property," he ordered, walking right up to her. Karen looked stunned. "Excuse me?" But Jenkins wasn't playing games. He handed her a printed county order signed off by the emergency coordinator. It stated that, due to active fire conditions and grid failure, county authority had temporarily taken over control of the backup infrastructure. My house was now considered part of an emergency operations zone. Karen's authority was suspended immediately. You could see her face change: confusion, then disbelief, then panic. But here's the twist. As Jenkins and I rushed to hook up a temporary cable from my emergency kit, the drone finally arrived, and not only did it verify the grid failure, but it also picked up a small brush fire starting near the hiking trail behind our neighborhood. The fire crew needed power restored now. We got the temporary line running just in time. The station came back online with barely a few minutes to spare. But the drone's footage, it also caught something else: Karen's dog knocking over a trash bin earlier that morning near dry brush. That's where the fire started. She hadn't just ripped out the power. She had unknowingly sparked the emergency herself. The fire crew responded fast, and thankfully, the flames were caught early before they could spread. Thanks to the restored backup grid, the dispatch system stayed online. The garage doors functioned, and response time was flawless. What could have turned into a full-blown disaster ended up being a close call and a serious wake-up for the entire neighborhood. Karen didn't say much after that. When she found out the fire started near the trash her dog knocked over, she went quiet. The county filed an official report linking her actions not only to the power outage, but also to the initial fire risk. No charges were filed, but she was removed from her HOA role after an emergency board vote. Even a few of her usual supporters didn't back her this time. It wasn't about rules anymore. It was about responsibility and the damage that can come from pride and poor judgment. In the days that followed, something surprising happened. Neighbors I'd barely spoken to before started showing up, asking how they could help. A few offered tools, others brought parts to help reinforce the emergency grid. People who never came to HOA meetings suddenly wanted to know more about how the backup system worked. It brought the community together in a way I hadn't seen before. Even the fire chief swung by with a thank you plaque for essential support during critical response. Looking back, the whole thing feels surreal. A single charging cable nearly took down our emergency infrastructure. All because someone didn't ask questions before taking action. But in the end, it also showed us how fragile things can be. how quickly they can turn around when the right people step up. So yeah, keep your cables clean. But maybe ask what they're connected to before pulling the plug.